When one thinks about German naval actions in the Caribbean, their mind will most likely immediately direct to the actions of the Kriegsmarine in the Second World War with the usage of the U-boat fleets. However, I hope that this video surprises you, as I will not be talking about the U-boats of the Caribbean, but rather take you back 71 years prior to the Second World War, before Germany even existed as a country. In fact, this battle occurred during the last months of what could arguably be noted as the most important war of Germany's history, the Franco-Prussian War. This conflict that I will be speaking about is the Battle of Havana in 1870, a single-ship battle between the North German Confederation's Federal Navy and the Navy of the French Third Republic. Of course, before we enter the battle, we must cover the background that led to this battle occurring off the Havana coast. The period of post-Napoleonic congressional Europe and the immediate period prior to the Battle of Havana mark, in my opinion, one of the most fascinating portions of German history. For those who may not be aware, the history of the nation we now call Germany has been very complex and troubled since the crowning of Charlemagne and inception of the Holy Roman Empire in 800 AD. Unlike many peoples in Europe, the Germans had not achieved the creation of a German nation, unlike many states surrounding it. For example, France had succeeded in creating a centralized government under the reign of King Louis IX, and with this created the French nation, a centralized state for the French people. The House of Habsburg had also accomplished this through creating a centralized government for their empire in the East, also known as the Habsburg monarchy, or better known as the Austrian Empire, but were unable to do the same for other states in which their family effectively owned, the Holy Roman Empire, which I had spoke of earlier. Within this empire existed at one point over 1,000 different independent states that each held their own governments. The two largest, Austria and Prussia, had been successful at developing their own centralized governments for their respective territories, while the overall empire failed to achieve such a status. Returning to the 19th century, the path that would ultimately lead to German unification began with the appointment of Otto von Bismarck as Minister-President of Prussia in 1861. Bismarck was the perfect choice, as he had the conviction and skills necessary to accomplish such a monumental task. An overall detailed account of unification of Germany can come in another video if it is so wanted, but that is not the topic of today's video. Under Bismarck's leadership, Prussia would engage in 3 decisive wars that would secure the future of a unified German nation: the Second Schleswig War against Denmark, the Austro-Prussian War against Austria, and ultimately the Franco-Prussian War against France. After the defeat of Austria in 1866, Prussia had found itself in complete dominance of Central Europe and almost prepared for its ultimate goal of unification. However, there was still one nation that did not want to see such a goal accomplished, and of course, this was the Second French Empire under Napoleon III. For centuries, the previously mentioned German states had been unorganized and therefore not a threat to France. But the concept of a fully organized and centralized German nation had been seen as extraordinarily dangerous to have on its border. After the previous 2 unification wars, France was in a position in which it had lost its position of dominance in mainland Europe, and it was almost desperate to regain it. In the month leading up to the war, Bismarck was able to provoke France in declaring war on Prussia, an action that he perfectly used in order to gain an alliance with the southern German states of Baden, Württemberg, Bavaria, and Hesse-Darmstadt in the war. By the 19th of July in 1870, this war would see the first true sight of what would become a unified Germany, united against the common enemy, France. On the 2nd of September, French Emperor Napoleon III would be captured by the Prussian army at the Battle of Sedan, and on the 4th of September, the French Third Republic would be proclaimed, and, unfortunately, the war continued. This is where we find the Battle of Havana. The Prussian Navy had always been an insignificant part of the Prussian military, being relatively ignored by the kingdom in favor of a much more significant army. If this comes as a surprise to you that Prussia actually had a navy, I don't blame you, as it was really not that important. Even within the unification wars, the navy had seen little to no action, and the battles that it participated had equally little to no contribution to the victories. The Battle of Havana was one of these strategically insignificant battles, but it could be argued that it was a strong moral victory for the Prussians. While mainland France was enduring a devastating war in Europe, the French territories in the Caribbean were continuing normal life in the tropical paradise. This is where one of the participants in the later battle enters, the wooden Avisio Bouvet. The Bouvet was a lead ship of her class, being designed as a ship with an interesting mix of designs. She had the hull of a clipper, the rigging of a bark, as well as a steam engine. She was armed with 3 guns, a 160mm and 2 120mm guns. Other sources state that the ship was armed with 4 120mm guns rather than 2. Unfortunately, I was not able to find out exactly the identity of the guns on the vessel. Being a Aviso, which is a medium to small size ship designed for speed and usage in colonial holdings, she was very light at 760 tons and had a very small crew amount, only 85. She had been built in 1865 and was assigned duty in the French West Indies sometime between then and 1870. At the Battle of Havana, she was commanded by Captain Alexander Francois. Her opponent was the SMS Meteor, a Chameleon-class gunboat which had only been commissioned in 1869 despite being launched in 1865. Her career prior to the Battle of Havana was very interesting in that after being launched, she was sent on an expedition to the North Pole, which delayed her commissioning. In 1869, she was ordered by the Admiralty Staff of the North German Navy to the Caribbean along with the corvette Arcona. The ship was equipped with a 150mm gun and 2 120mm guns, this complement being outmatched by the 2 extra guns on the Bouvet. The Meteor would reach Barbados on the 19th of December, but was diverted along with the training ship Niobe to Venezuela due to unrest, and stayed there until March of 1870. She would still be in the Caribbean when France declared war on the 19th of July of that year. At the Battle of Havana, she was commanded by Captain Lieutenant Edouard von Canois. This battle's beginning started quite interestingly, with the Meteor arriving in Havana harbor on the 7th of November, with the Bouvet arriving only an hour later in the exact same harbor. With both ships moored, they were able to easily identify each other due to their close proximity. You can imagine how that must have been, walking on deck, then looking out just to see your enemy right in front of you. However, due to Cuba being a territory of the neutral Spain, neither ship could take action. Due to this, Captain Francois of the Bouvet sent a formal challenge to the Prussian captain to engage in what was effectively a naval duel. This is a rare display of the antique concepts of chivalry in naval warfare, with both ships engaging in an honorable duel. Captain von Canois accepted the duel, but had to wait 24 hours to meet the French ship in international waters due to the neutrality laws of the day. Once both ships are ensured to be 16 kilometers off the Cuban coast, the duel began on the 9th of November 1870. The order of battle saw the Bouvet being more capable of outrunning and outgunning the Meteor. However, she had many critical flaws in her design. The first was the way in which her main caliber gun was mounted, which prevented reliable accuracy when attempting to fire. In addition, the ship was strangely designed in that a portion of her boiler was exposed above the deck and was unprotected. This seems like a very peculiar design for a warship, but if I had to guess, this design flaw was overlooked by her builders due to the ship being a light aviso. Therefore, she would not be engaging other ships directly, but rather outrunning battles or just using her weapons to engage targets on shore. In these cases, the boiler would most likely not be in danger of being hit and therefore not need armor protection. The crew was acutely aware of this and attempted to use anything at their disposal to create a makeshift armor for the boiler, such as using sandbags and placing chains. The Meteor did not possess any of these flaws, but was much slower than the Bouvet. The battle officially began at 14:30 with the Bouvet firing shots at the Meteor from about 4 kilometers. The Meteor would return fire, and the situation of both ships firing at each other would continue for 2 more hours without any significant damage to either ship being scored. This is when Captain Francois devises a new tactic. He was going to ram the Meteor. At 1630, Captain Francois went all out and increased the Bouvet's speed to 11 knots, and aimed his ship straight for his opponent. The two ships collided, but the Bouvet failed to cause serious damage that would have seen the defeat of the Meteor. Instead, the rigging of the ship collapsed due to the collision and threw debris and her sails all to the deck. In addition, the rigging became caught in her propeller, and she was dead in the water. It was at this time that the German crew came up with their own unique plan. Instead of ramming the Bouvet, they would attempt to board and capture the ship. This attempt was not successful, as the French crew were able to defend their ship using various small arms on board. After the collision, Francois noticed that the collapsing of the Meteor's rigging was important, but did not know that her propeller had become caught, and therefore still believed that she was still fully operational. It was then he ordered the ship to turn hard to starboard in order to face the Meteor again. Despite not being successful the first time, the Bouvet once again was going to ram the Meteor. The Meteor reacted by turning to port and introducing a beam reach to counter the Bouvet's approach. As the ship went to engage her opponent, a shell hit the exposed portion of the boiler, spoken about earlier, and caused her to become immobilized as well. This marks another interesting portion of the battle, as the Bouvet then released her sails and hurriedly disengaged from the Meteor. The Prussian crew was able to successfully free their propeller, but it was too late, and Bouvet had reached Cuban territorial waters. The Spanish, seeing the Meteor chasing Bouvet, did not like this, and fired warning shots at the Prussian ship in order to declare that the battle had concluded. As the Bouvet had disengaged, the Meteor had effectively won the duel. The battle is generally seen as inconclusive, but it can be argued that the disengagement of the Bouvet before either ship had been fully neutralized is justification for the battle being declared a victory for the Prussian Navy. Funnily enough, both ships would return to Havana harbor to once again eye each other while sitting in the harbor. Sources from the New York Times state that the Meteor had lost 2 men, with 1 injured, while the French upwards of 3 to 10 killed or wounded. Commander of the Bouvet, Alexander Francois, was promoted to full captain in December of that year, while Lieutenant Captain von Knorr was promoted to Korvettenkapitän, also known as Corvette Captain, and awarded the Iron Cross Second Class in 1871. It is unknown about the whereabouts of the Bouvet after the battle, but the Meteor was forced to remain in Havana until the end of the war in May of 1871. The Bouvet would continue to be operational until September of 1871, where she ran aground on a reef of the Isle of Vache island. The Meteor would go on to be given various duties, such as a survey and training ship, before being sunk as a target in 1877. While the Battle of Havana had little to no effect on the later German victory in 1871, it provided a victory for the morale of the troops and people of the German coalition. On the 18th of January 1871, the German Empire was proclaimed in the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles, finally achieving the dream of unification that existed for centuries within the German people. Thank you very much for watching, and please let me know what you thought of the video. If there is anything that you think I could fix within the video, have questions, or just have a few comments, please let me know in the comments section below. If you would like to continue to see videos on obscure naval battles or obscure maritime history, please be sure to subscribe and request what you would like to see.